What do Mongols, Marco Polo, Bitcoin, and FBI all have in common? One word: Silk Road. For centuries, the name Silk Road referred to a vast network of trade routes stretching over 4,000 miles connecting China to the Mediterranean. These ancient paths carried more than just shimmering fabric. They transported black pepper from India, jade from Central Asia, gunpowder from China, and philosophical ideas that shaped civilizations. It was an artery of commerce, culture, and conquest. But in the 21st century, that name took an entirely new and sinister meaning. Gone were the merchants on camels and caravans snaking through deserts. Instead, in the shadows of the internet, Silk Road became the name of an underground digital bazaar, where heroin was one click away and a murder for hire ad could be found next to a vendor review. And at the center of it all stood one man, Ross Ulbricht, a physics nerd from Texas who dreamed of changing the world. Hi, I'm Kale, and today we're diving into one of the most shocking stories in cybercrime history, the rise and fall of the Silk Road marketplace, a tale of idealism, crime, obsession, and betrayal set in the shadows of the digital frontier. In 2011, Ross Ulbricht was just 26 years old. Bright, idealistic, and deeply influenced by libertarian philosophy, Ross believed in individual freedom, especially freedom from government control. He studied physics at the University of Texas and later earned a master's in materials science. But academia wasn't enough. He wanted more than just formulas and lab coats. He wanted revolution. His inspiration, a mixture of Ayn Rand, Ron Paul, and the Austrian School of Economics. He was obsessed with the idea of a decentralized marketplace, one that didn't rely on governments, banks, or middlemen. The internet in its infinite reach was the perfect playground, and two key technologies gave him the tools he needed. Tor, which anonymized web activity and hid users' locations, and Bitcoin, a digital currency that was at the time nearly untraceable. So, Ross created a website. Its name was a quiet nod to history, Silk Road. At first glance, the concept was simple, an online marketplace where anything could be bought or sold. No taxes, no oversight, no rules, just supply and demand. And people came. Fast. Within months, Silk Road exploded in popularity. It wasn't selling iPhones or used furniture. It was offering cocaine, meth, LSD, and ecstasy. Psychedelics were among the most common listings, but soon, harder drugs dominated the front page. And it wasn't just the products, it was the experience. The site was sleek, intuitive, and strangely customer-friendly. Silk Road operated more like Amazon Prime than a dark alley transaction. Vendors had usernames like Dr. X or Friendly Chemist, complete with ratings, response times, and customer reviews like, quote, shipped fast, perfect packaging, will buy again, end quote. Some sellers offered refund policies or reship guarantees if packages were seized. There were guides on how to receive contraband discreetly and tutorials for newbies learning how to use Bitcoin for the first time. It was the Uber Eats of narcotics with 5-star ratings, and business boomed. At its peak, Silk Road had nearly 1 million users, conducted over 600,000 transactions, and facilitated nearly 1.2 billion in total sales. The FBI later called it the most sophisticated and extensive criminal marketplace on the internet. But who was running it? Ross Ulbricht operated under the alias Dread Pirate Roberts, and Nod to the Princess Bride, where the identity of the legendary pirate was passed down from person to person, maintaining the illusion of an immortal criminal. The alias gave Ross an edge. He wasn't just a coder, he became a myth. Behind the scenes, he was resolving disputes, banning vendors who scammed buyers, and enforcing a strict no explicit contents of children, no weapons, no violence policy. He even penned manifesto-style forum posts speaking of Silk Road as a peaceful protest, a marketplace that allowed consenting adults to make free choices. But like every empire built in the shadows, cracks were coming. As Silk Road's influence grew, so did its enemies. The DEA, FBI, IRS, Secret Service, and Homeland Security all began circling. But it wasn't just about the drugs, it was about the message, quote, "We've built a world without you, and it works," end quote. That made Ross and Silk Road dangerous. Meanwhile, paranoia was setting in. Running the site had gone from ideology to obsession. Ross was glued to his laptop, managing security, moderating posts, updating encryption, all while trying to maintain a low profile in real life. And then the paranoia turned deadly. Ross allegedly ordered hits on people, including a former administrator who had threatened to leak user data. He negotiated payments in Bitcoin, provided names and addresses, and even requested photographic proof of death. One hit was staged by undercover agents who sent him a fake photo of a man gagged, beaten, and dead. Whether Ross intended for anyone to die or was manipulated into it is still debated, but the messages were real, the Bitcoin payments were real, the darkness had crossed the line. Ross Ulbricht, once a peace-loving libertarian, now stood accused of playing God in the underworld. For all his technical genius, Ross made critical mistakes that would eventually undo everything. In early 2011, on a website called Stack Overflow, Ross posted under his real name asking how to configure a hidden Tor server. He later deleted the post and created a new account, but the original post was archived. Then came the aliases. One of his early username, Altoid, posted on Bitcoin forums promoting Silk Road. That same account once invited users to email Ross Ulbricht. It was like a digital trail of breadcrumbs. Meanwhile, Feds used forensic blockchain analysis to trace Bitcoin flowing through Silk Road wallets. They infiltrated the forum using fake vendor accounts. They surveilled Ross in real life, matching his activity patterns to Silk Road admin times. By mid-2013, federal agents were closing in, but they needed a smoking gun, proof that Ross was indeed Dread Pirate Roberts. And then came the moment that sealed his fate. On October 1st, 2013, Ross walked into the Glen Park Library in San Francisco. He sat at a table, opened his laptop, and logged into Silk Road, admin panel and all. Unbeknownst to him, several federal agents were nearby, watching. They staged a domestic argument as a distraction. As Ross looked up, another agent grabbed the laptop before he could close or encrypt it. It was still open, logged in, and full of evidence. The mask had come off. Game over. Ross's trial began in January 2015 in a Manhattan courtroom. The prosecution painted a stark picture. Ross wasn't some naive dreamer. He was a criminal mastermind who had built the Amazon of illegal drugs, profited off addiction, and arranged murders to protect his kingdom. They called it the modern Al Capone story with code instead of Tommy guns. The defense tried a risky strategy. They admitted Ross created Silk Road but claimed he handed it off early to other people who used the Dread Pirate Roberts name, but the evidence was overwhelming. Chat logs from Dread Pirate Roberts matched Ross's writing style. A digital journal on his laptop outlined the creation and operation of Silk Road. Chat logs showed real-time negotiations, administrative actions, and hitman discussions. A spreadsheet on his computer detailed his net worth, over $28 million in Bitcoin. One entry read, quote, "I wish I could go back and never have started this," end quote. It took the jury less than 4 hours to deliver a verdict, guilty on all 7 counts. His sentence, 2 life terms plus 40 years with no possibility of parole. To put it in perspective, that's a harsher sentence than many convicted terrorists or cartel leaders receive. Ross would never walk free again, or so it seemed. To this day, many legal experts say it was one of the harshest sentences ever handed down for a non-violent first-time offender. Ross Ulbricht, who had never pulled a trigger, was going to die in prison. The reaction was instant and polarized. To some, Ross was a digital terrorist. He had enabled overdoses, money laundering, and cybercrime at an unprecedented scale. Silk Road wasn't a protest, it was a poison. But to others, Ross was a symbol of government overreach. A grassroots movement called Free Ross began gaining momentum. Petitions with hundreds of thousands of signatures demanded his release. His mother, Lynn Ulbricht, became a full-time activist, calling the trial a sham and the sentence cruel and unusual. Tech leaders, civil liberties advocates, and libertarians joined the chorus. Edward Snowden criticized the sentence. Ron Paul called it a travesty of justice. Some questioned why child traffickers, arms dealers, and actual murderers were serving lighter sentences than Ross. And then there was a double standard. During the investigation, 2 federal agents involved in the case were convicted of stealing Bitcoin from the Silk Road investigation. Yes, the investigators were caught embezzling from the evidence, but their misconduct was never allowed into Ross's trial. Was that justice, or was Ross's scapegoat a digital Icarus punished not just for his crimes, but for flying too close to the ideals of a decentralized, leaderless world? In a shocking and highly controversial move, Ross Ulbricht was granted a presidential pardon on January 21, 2025. The decision sparked a media firestorm. To some, it was a triumph, a long overdue correction for a sentence that had become a symbol of broken justice. To others, it was madness. They saw a convicted criminal walk free while overdose rates continued to climb and dark web markets thrived. So why was he pardoned? Some say it was political theater. Others believe the tide of public opinion and the normalization of crypto culture had finally tipped the scale. Either way, it raised a disturbing question. Did the government win the battle but lose the war? Because Silk Road was just the beginning, newer markets, more secure, more decentralized, rose from the ashes, and the playbook Ross Road is still being used today. The Silk Road was never just a website. It was a collision of ideas: privacy versus surveillance, freedom versus law, utopia versus reality. Ross Ulbricht wasn't just a coder, he was a protagonist of a digital Greek tragedy. He reached for revolution, he built something powerful, and he paid the price. Whether you see him as a martyr or a menace, one thing is clear: the internet will never forget him. And in many ways, the war he started is still being fought on servers, in courtrooms, and in every debate about the future of digital freedom. Because in the shadows of the web, there's always another Silk Road. Thanks for watching. Like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.
Double Helix, coded to reality.